No-till mistakes. Let's talk about it. All right, guys. So I obviously hear and talk to a lot of different growers with a lot of different goals. And I wanted to highlight some of the things that I see that are pretty common about no-tilling and mistakes, whether it's with a drill or broadcasting, etc. So number one is just giving up too soon. I think that a lot of times people go, well, tillage works. I've planted with tillage and it gives me this great food plot or whatnot, or farm field or cover crop or whatever you're trying to establish. And that's true. And as I've said in other videos, when you till, you are hyper breaking down or rapidly breaking down your organic matter by adding oxygen into the microbial system, right? And your microbes are going to cycle that organic matter and they're going to do so very rapidly. So you're basically getting like a boost of fertilizer right there. Now the question is not, does tillage work? The question is more so, is the sustainability or long-term management of tillage without having to continue to increase inputs at an increased amount to get the same yield. So that's really why people are interested in no-till and erosion conservation and such. So with that being said, when you transition into a no-till system, I think a lot of times people expect to just go in there, whether it's with a beautiful no-till drill or a broadcast spreader, and see the same amount of growth at the same relative time. And it just simply takes a little bit longer. So what I try to tell people is it's a more natural release of your organic matter, specifically if you're not doing any fertility on top of it. So keep that in mind when doing no-till, and it should get better as you cycle your nutrients, especially if you're using like the Vitalize 1-2 system and you're getting a really robust microbial system underground and you're rapidly cycling nutrients. No-till gets more and more and more efficient. A lot of times in ag, where they're planting row crops and they are using in-row fertility, you'll hear a lot of times people say no-till starts slow but finishes strong. So keep that also in mind. Number two, thatch. Too much thatch or too little thatch. This is something that I see a lot. We talk about carbon and nitrogen ratios of your cover crop and balancing that. We do that for you at Vitalize Seed, but it's something that I see a lot of people that have a whole bunch of really robust thatch because they had planted either a rye grain or they took over a fallowed field or something and it's a really, really dense thatch and they simply will just spray it and broadcast into it. And that certainly can work, but oftentimes you get what's called nutrient tie-up. So you also might have just too much thatch where you're simply shading those young seedlings. So keep that in mind. That's really important about balance when you're looking at your carbon thatch sources versus those young little seedlings. On the reverse side of that, too little thatch, right? We don't want our seeds to be prone to predation of coons and turkeys and birds, etc. So having that thatch cover is critical. Also, it helps with the process of retaining moisture, right? Because if your thatch is laying down over those young seedlings, that's going to be really, really helpful in getting dew to hold around those seedlings, almost like a little greenhouse effect before that seedling can pop through that thatch. Another thing that I'll add about the thatch is sometimes people will say, hey, I'm going to mow it off first, then I'm going to wait a week and then spray it and then seed into it. Well, we don't want to do that because that can create a couple issues. One, too little thatch, right? Because now you've taken your thatch, you've mowed it down, and then you simply are throwing the seed in here and you're spraying, but there's really not much cover here. You have some stubble and the seed sitting there, so you get an increased rate of predation. The other issue that I see there is when you mow, whether it's with a flail, you're going to have some duff on top. Flail mower, bush hog, doesn't really matter. You're going to have some duff on top. And now you're broadcasting your seed and it's sitting on that duff. So I always try to tell people, if you're no-tilling with a drill or if you're broadcasting, think of it as running a comb through hair. If your hair is matted down and you're trying to run a comb through it, it's difficult. You're pulling knots out. If your hair's standing up and you're running a comb through it, you have a little bit of water on the comb or whatnot, and you go to run the comb through, it's going to really go through easily. It's the same idea with a no-till drill, right? You're going to have that thatch standing, and that drill's going to run through there just like a comb running through hair. It's going to lay that down, and now you have a nice even thatch. Same idea with broadcast. You want to broadcast into this and then lay that down over the top. So that's another common mistake. Seed rate, too much, too little, those are very, very common. So be cognizant, observe, use exclusion fences. Year one, start at, like with Vitalize Carbon, though, 45 pounds to the acre. Year two, if oh man, the deer really hammered it, my exclusion fence was a 2 foot difference. Maybe we bump that up a little bit. Maybe you bump it down a little bit. If you go, man, I had more food than I could possibly handle, I can reduce my seeding rate just ever so slightly. I just simply don't need that density. Normally, you can tell this by an exclusion fence and observing how the plants and species within that system are growing. Timing with the rain, obviously we can't control Mother Nature, but as best as you can to time with a rain, that is going to really, really help no-till systems, especially if you're broadcasting, get off to a good start. So that's something that if you got 1 or 2 different times where you can get out and plant and you look at the forecast and one's closer to a good consistent rainfall forecast, definitely go with that. And the last item that I touched on in a couple other videos, but I just want to hit on again, is understanding fertility management, specifically in a no-till system. So not just, hey, I heard chicken manure is good, so I'm going to throw out that. Or I heard that triple 13 is good, so I'm going to throw out that. By taking a soil test and then understanding or consulting somebody that can help you. If you're using Vitalize Seed or you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help. If I don't know, I will talk to some of the agronomists we work with full-time. That do this full-time agronomy work for farmers, and we can contact them and they'll be able to help us. But in the end, if you're looking to do fertility recommendations, you want to understand how those nutrients are going to move through the soil profile. So if it's carbon load or fall mix and you want to use a little bit of synthetic nitrogen or conventional nitrogen, however you want to define it, okay, well, how should you use it? What type of nitrogen is it? Is it a urea? If you're doing the no-till system, are you going to be putting it down at the time of planting? Well, if it's urea and you don't have rainfall in the forecast, that's not going to make sense, right? So going through every one of those scenarios and understanding where and why does it make sense to use some nutrients versus others, and how are you going to be applying them so you get the most out of your seed and the most out of your fertility and the most out of your dollar. Hopefully you all found that helpful. If you did, please check us out, follow along, and subscribe, and check us out at vitalizeseed.com. We appreciate y'all.